Hello, attendees. Hi, everyone. I'm Ken Rutkowski. Welcome to our ongoing online summit where we talk about what's going on with blockchain, fintech surge, fintech, crypto, you name it. We bring guests from around the world and we feature what's going to be happening in October at our Future Blockchain Summit and Fintech Surge. We're very excited to have you join us. So as people are coming together, we're going to take your questions, your ideas, but of course, my co-host with me, Kristina, is joining us from, you're in Italy, but most people don't know this. You're Russian descent, aren't you?
Well, I'm like cosmopolite. I think this is the future. We don't have any nationality or citizenship. I'm decentralized.
You're decentralized. But hey, let's talk about Cointelegraph, the online publication. It's been around for a long time, haven't you guys?
Oh, yes. Well, not as Bitcoin, but still for like over 5 years. And it does mean that we are veterans on the market, and it's been a passionate period of time. So I'm happy to represent Cointelegraph here. Hi, everyone. Really looking forward to your questions and ideas. And thank you very much for having me here. It's always a pleasure.
Cointelegraph's been around, like it's 5 years. You're thinking that's not long. Hey, in this space,
7,
it's impressive. It's long,
yeah.
7, and it has tons
more
of
or less
articles.
like Dogecoin, you know, like the
I do want to talk about that. That's going to be interesting. And we also have Dr. Marwan joining us. And Dr. Marwan is a fixture of the Dubai crypto blockchain Bitcoin space. Dr. Marwan, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. It's always a pleasure to be here with you guys in the Future Blockchain Summit seminars, and as well to see you guys again. We've known each other for a while as well, so it's good to see you.
Dr. Marwan, can you turn up the enthusiasm just a little more, please?
Okay.
Come on. And of course, Oscar, who is one of the directors of the event that takes place. Oscar, can you give us a little sample of what's going to be taking place in October, please?
Well, we are consolidating many of our tech events at GITEX, where FinTech Surge is being launched, and the Future Blockchain Summit will be happening for the 4th year. And we'll be having you back, Ken and Kristina. And Dr. Marwan, who is a co-founder of the event, one can unofficially claim. So we're really glad and excited. It's going to be taking place during Expo 2020. That kicks off on October 1st.
All right. Awesome. And by the way, you go to the FinTech Surge site or Blockchain Summit, Future Blockchain Summit, get your tickets, get ready to go in this. We have a featured guest speaker on who's going to join us in a moment, and that's Brett King. I've known for about 15 years. Brett has really gone after what's going on with the banking system, and now he's looking at the augmented future, life in the next generation fast lane, which we'll talk to Brett a little later on. But before we do that, I want to do a little bantering between our co-hosts that are joining us. First, Kristina, what is hot in the news in your world?
Oh, I would like to cite a prominent financial expert, Lloyd Ostertag, who at the last Saturday Night Live shared that lately crypto prices have been soaring for cryptos like Bitcoin, Ether, and especially Dogecoin. Well, for those who do not know, Lloyd Ostertag is actually Elon Musk. He joined the Saturday Night Live as Lloyd Ostertag. So actually Dogecoin is everywhere, and every day I'm checking our website and I'm counting how many news we have on Dogecoin. So there will be a lunar mission funded by Dogecoin. There will be there are people who will leave Golden Sachs just because they already became billionaires with Dogecoin. Do you have any Dogecoin, Ken?
I bought it actually in Dubai while I was sitting at an Indian.
Oh, so Ken also became a billionaire Dogecoin, and maybe left us for some.
He had better things to do suddenly.
Oh, awesome. Okay.
See, is he still there? Has he dropped off?
Yeah,
Well,
I think he just checked the price and he realized that he made a fortune.
Dr. Marwan, how do
Yes.
you see application of Dogecoin in some nearest future?
Look, I don't recommend people get into Dogecoin, to be honest. If they choose to get into crypto, I think the best bet is something like Bitcoin or right now Ethereum. Again, if somebody invests in Dogecoin, they have to invest a little bit of money, no more than I would say $1,000 or so, if they're new to crypto. But if they know what they're doing and they know the risk associated, then yeah, feel free. Why not?
So
I'm sorry,
Dogecoin
I
dumped and
disappeared.
is back.
Yeah, I got it. I put about $12,000 into it.
Oh, okay.
Did
I
well.
won't even count how much it is now. Okay.
Yeah, it did well. Actually,
No.
I've done well on a bunch of weird ones. These meme tokens have done really well. Meme coins, Super Doge, which I got in very, very early. I love, and I brought it up last time. I like these coins that have a component to where they give to charity. And that's what I liked about Super Doge. It gives to 3 different charities. So as that grows, it's contributing to nonprofits. I just love that idea. And that thing's done 30x also. So I like these. Marwan, why do you think there's such a fascination around meme coins?
It's new money coming in. It's all these, young people who join these decentralized wallets that are easy to use. I don't want to name names. No free, plugs here. But it's the young people. They have disposable income. They see the returns. And I know a couple of stories of guys that their kids told them to buy these memes, and they were already into crypto, and they said, "Yeah, why not? I'll buy it for my kid." Just like with Dogecoin as well, the kids were buying it. So
Why do you think it's dogs, not cats? I mean, did you know that there is another dog token that surged like 45% this week, launched by Yearn Finance, and it's called Woofy.
Yeah,
and
Woofy.
There was an ad drop for users in Twitter who posted a picture of themselves being licked by a dog. So this is the canine economy.
Yeah, but Marwan, wait, Dr. Marwan, you said something I want to make sure it's not free advertising. It's more or less information. What wallets seem to be interesting that seem to be promoting meme coins?
So the Trust Wallet is one of them. There's another one called KuCoin, but there's other ones as well. But these are the 2 main ones. For example, YFI or Yield Finance surged 40% because of this Woofy coin, right? And some other ones like Shiba Inu listed on a lot of big exchanges like Poloniex, for example, and that caused a huge surge. There are other ones like Pig Finance. There's a lot of other, silly ones that came out that surged dramatically, like 1,000 plus. There are ones I like the ones you mentioned that have a charity aspect to them. There's ones that have a community aspect to them and paying back to the community and contributors of crypto, like Shiba Inu, I think donated a huge sum to Vitalik, one of the founders of Ethereum, and other ones as well that did good with the money that they received. But that doesn't mean that there's no risk. Of course, a lot of people will come in and they will really get damaged and financially hurt from this.
Have you noticed that some people are open sourcing their wallets to show what they have in there so you can follow their template of what they're investing into, which I think is pretty interesting?
Yeah, and the funny thing is this: a lot of these coins as well are not very liquid. So after you buy them, even if they go up in value, you cannot easily sell them, which is another problem, a modern day problem, that you buy something and it's extremely hard to sell. And sometimes people buy a little bit of it, and the cost of gas will be higher than the cost of what they purchase. So these are all these, oxymorons and dilemmas that we have with these kind of coins.
And Kristina, have you
gas price is not about oil and gas. It's about Ether's gas fee that is actually a price for a transaction. And Ether is another hero of this week. It breaks ATH every day.
It's unbelievable what's happening.
11% today, believe it or not.
Why is Ethereum blowing up? Is it because it's the next alternative to Bitcoin, and Bitcoin in some people's minds is just too high? What's your thought?
That's a very interesting question. My opinion is just that people are starting diversifying their portfolio. Definitely Ethereum has an incredible platform for DeFi, for NFTs, and a lot of the services that are developing on the Ethereum network actually given its more momentum. So Ether is now at its, how much it is now? 4,300. Oh my gosh.
But let's be realistic. To do large NFTs, yes, I get Ethereum, but to do smaller and smaller NFTs, it doesn't make much sense to use Ether. It's too expensive. So I like what Wax is doing. I think Wax is a better alternative on the NFT side. And Wax, to me, is insanely undervalued. So watch where Wax goes. But I want to go back to this idea of looking at where Ether is compared to Ethereum compared to Bitcoin. I think institutional investors are starting getting more actively involved in Ethereum. And that's why we're seeing this price increase.
I think it's also network effect as well. Like a lot of these coins that you mentioned, the meme coins are all on Ethereum, with the exception of a couple that are on Pancake Swap, like on the Binance chain. But people are there. People are already, hold Ethereum wallets. They're already on Uniswap. They already have all these assets involved. All their friends and their friends' friends are on Ethereum. So it's extremely hard to get out of that ecosystem.
Someone just said Super Doge, and I guess he's giving a high five on that. They're so hard to find, by the way, all these memes. It seems like if they have good characters, they look good, they're collectibles then. Hey, by the way, I think one of the bigger stories that people are not talking about, Kristina, maybe you're aware of this, is in the States, you have Robinhood, which is a very big investment tool that has really driven a lot of stocks, traditional stocks up because they've given basic investors tools to really do some serious investing. But most don't realize that when they buy any crypto inside there, they can't move it anywhere. It only can stay inside the Robinhood platform. They can't move it to other wallets. And I think this is going to be a big shocker later on when those buyers of cryptos start to get more educated. They're going to be seriously surprised at their inability to move it around.
Well, I think that you mentioned a very important point here, that actually when you are inside the crypto, you have to educate yourself every day. There are news every day about adoption and what you can do with your, like, if you're talking about, for example, Revolut, though they just announced that you can potentially maybe pull out your crypto out of your account, but it's not yet possible. So we have this changes in the market overall.
Yeah, it's interesting. Dr. Marwan, I know Bitcoin has been something very passionate to you. You're looking at Bitcoin, I think it's at 53,000. To you, is it still a good investment, meaning massive growth, or do you think we're starting at kind of that peak of where growth is for Bitcoin, or do you see it going to the 100,000, 200,000 space?
So I think a lot of this is speculation, of course, and of course it's all about big money coming in. Institutional investors have chosen Bitcoin over everything else because of the fundamentals, which means that it will still have room to grow. I would think around 80 to 100 is a safe bet for this year. But I also think that the dominance has decreased dramatically now. It's at 44 as compared to earlier this year, which was 64%. So that's a huge, market taken away from Bitcoin into all these other alternative coins. So that's something to watch out for. So I would say 80 would be a safe bet, but 100 could be potentially also reachable. But,
and then
not
also,
tomorrow, I don't think at this year.
Not tomorrow. And what's your thought on the DeFi space and where that's going? What gets you excited about DeFi?
I think we're at the very beginning, very early days of DeFi. I think DeFi has not reached everyday status yet. Cryptocurrencies are talked about, I don't know if you've seen in Dubai, by everyone. So it reached that, tipping point. But I think DeFi is still early because of the tools and the ways where you can get into the market are harder. The wallets are harder. The staking is not understood by everyone. Farming is not understood and all this stuff. So it's going to take a bit of a while, but I think these meme coins will help because you can stake them as well. Yeah, and I think people will get into it.
But one of the problems I've noticed, and Kristina and Dr. Marwan, please answer us what you think, is when an exchange doesn't accept fiat, it really does almost preclude anyone that wants to get into it because there's too many steps for them to get into any of these investments. It's too complicated.
Yeah, but I think the people are using like their friends and family. Like a lot of people reach out to their friends and family who are, you know, the nerd of the family to help them out to cash them, and that's actually working tremendously well here, at least in Dubai.
But that's a
I'm
very
sure it's the
interesting
case.
point because, well, the DeFi space called open source and it's open for everyone. But in the end, it's open for those who know like how to code and what does development mean. And this is still a very tight, close community. And well, my question to you, Dr. Marwan, do you think that we as a community, what can we do in order to bring more people into this market sphere innovations?
So I finally got my dad into it a little bit. So that's a huge milestone. But I think, look, it's all about education. It's all about getting wallets done. So the way I got people involved is actually, I told them, give me cash, I'll get you a trust wallet. There's no KYC involved. There's no, you know, anything involved with you know, barrier to getting involved. Even if you get involved with a small amount, at least you're in the system. You have to be in it to win it, right? And you have to be really using it, not just talking about it. A lot of people reminisce and talk and say, "Oh, I wish I got in." Download the wallet, get in, get with it.
I get it, but I don't think it's as easy. You know, having a Marwan in the family that could help out is great. The average consumer, it's still too complicated. And Christine's right.
I totally agree. Yes.
It's just we're in it and a little deeper. Hey, Dr. Marwan, the event's coming up in October, Future Blockchain Summit and FinTech Surge. What are you excited to talk about when the event comes?
I think there's a lot of topics that are going to be very interesting. The NFT space by itself it's a huge space, and I think we're going to see a lot more developed here. A lot of tying up the real world assets with NFTs will be an amazing thing. We've already seen some examples of that, like diamonds on NFTs. We've seen art cars now as well in Dubai and other places that are coming up. Properties, that kind of stuff will be the next progression. And also in the space of DeFi, we haven't seen real world assets used as collateral for DeFi platforms. We've only seen crypto involved, but I think when everything gets digitized, and that could happen as soon as October, believe it or not, where we'll have real life as partial collateral for real life items with digital representation as a part collateral for taking crypto loans.
I think we really should be looking at NFTs beyond the collectible side, but the NFTs as things like what will be in your storage, or you want to call it a locker as opposed to a wallet. So think about your passport or your health information or your deed to your home. Your locker or wallet are going to be two different areas. And I think that's going to be exciting. It's like what blockchain was when it first started. Everyone thought it was crypto, and then we realized it's everything else. And I think that's where the conversation is going to go. Hey guys, I would love to welcome our featured speaker today. Our featured speaker, like I've mentioned, I've known for about 15 years. His books range from Breaking Banks to Bank 2.0, 3.0, and 4.0. His latest book, Augmented, is looking at where the future of things are going. I like how he calls it life in the smart lane. Brett King has worked in the banking industry, the finance industry. He's one of the top tier speakers on the planet. He's helped countries develop their banking mechanisms. Plus, he is a serial investor and an entrepreneur. One of his companies did very, very well, Moving Bank, which he sold for a lot of money. So if we're at lunch right now, he would pick up the bill. But since we're not at lunch, we just get a rain check on that. Brett King is joining us. Thank you so much, Mr. King, for being part of us with us today.
I'm happy to buy you lunch, Ken. I probably owe you a lunch, but
I actually think you do.
Hello, everyone. Salam. Eid Mubarak. Yes. It's really interesting, this conversation about crypto. Of course, Doge is associated with Elon. It'd be an interesting thought exercise, given what you talked about, Ken, in respect to the digitization of assets is, what would a currency look like on Mars? That's an interesting thought exercise because it really takes us into this sort of trajectory of where crypto is taking us. And if you look at value exchange, what we see right now is very similar to the early days back in the 1600s and 1700s with banks who used to issue their own currency. And there wasn't like a single fiat currency. That sort of happened a bit later on. And so it's a very interesting evolution of money that we're actually seeing now as a result of digitization. If you were going to design money for the 21st century, it probably wouldn't look like a US greenback, right? It'd have to have different properties. And that's really what we're seeing evolving right now.
I wonder what Gene Roddenberry, the creator of Star Trek, would say money was during the enterprise days, because he never really talked about it. He talked about this ubiquitous way of paying for everything, but they never mentioned money. So digital was part of that future. Give us the digital future, because will it be the US dollar, the digital yuan? What will the unify currency be?
So, Roddenberry had this vision that money wasn't needed. In fact, you hear the various characters talk about it, because when you have abundance of AI and technology, you can use resources more efficiently. So you don't need an underlying, capitalist system for it. But there was currency for some parts of the Trek universe. It was called gold press latinum. And so the unique properties of gold press latinum is it couldn't be replicated using a Star Trek replicator, right? And because of its atomic properties. So it still had an element of scarcity. But actually, an interesting, there's an author, I don't know if you're familiar with him, Kim Stanley Robinson, who wrote a trilogy on establishing colonization on Mars. It's probably the standard in terms of Mars colonization. And he talked about a new type of economics. He called it eco-poetics, which basically was, if you're on Mars, the objective for the entire population is to get to sustainability. Musk talks about this. What happens if the Starship stops sending food and resources? And so that becomes the goal of the colony, right? And then after that, you look at sustainable prosperity. And so he proposed a currency that essentially was carbon neutral, and people grew assets by how much energy they put back into the system rather than taking out of it. And so this sort of gives us the theme of sort of smart programmable money. And so with the yuan, for example, we're using existing digital wallets now. Alipay is just now supporting yuan. It's just happened in the last few days. But you could program money. For example, you could give a universal basic income to people using a central bank digital currency, and you could limit it to purchases of staples, for example. So there's various ways that money could evolve from this point that get really interesting.
I just want to make sure everybody that is watching this, if you have a question or comment or an idea, please put it inside the chat. You're part of this dialogue as much as we are here, so please contribute. Kristina, where do you think money will be, or what it's going to look like in the future? Educate Mr. King.
I think that money is such an imagined order that actually that's a very interesting reflection. What would become if we have to invent money from the scratch? And I'm not sure that at this point we can start from the scratch. So we have this incredible legacy. Well, I'm based in Italy, and banks actually started blooming here in Italy. And everything that we have with the banking system, also the problem that we have with the banking system, actually have roots back into Florence and Venice and like 500 years ago. I'm very much interested in knowing, do you think that Mars will have just one currency, or will it be all this, multiple choices, this famous diversify your portfolio thing? So will it be one or 100? Fred?
So I think, the key difference between Mars and Earth is that capitalism won't be the driver. Not making profits like we do for corporations here. The key driver, the sole purpose of the Martian economy in the first 50, 100 years will be self-sustainability. And so that's going to produce a very different behavior. How do you measure your activity in an economy like that? You don't measure it by creating wealth. You measure it by creating a sustainable environment. So,
guys, let's be realistic. We're not going to live on Mars, okay? Dr. Marwan's wife is an astronaut. astronaut. She works on the Mars program. We're not going to live there. Okay. We could pontificate and have a fun time, but we're not going to live on Mars.
Okay, Ken, but we can think whether capitalism is our future or not.
Well, I agree with
Yes,
that's where we need to go
yes.
on the capitalistic side. You're saying it's the end of capitalism, don't you, Brett?
Well, no, I think capitalism needs reform to deal with the major changes we're going to have. You know, think about the two major changes that we're going to experience over the next 50 to 100 years. First, the emergence of a competing intelligence, artificial intelligence. And secondly, the impact of climate change on the planet. Both of those are going to materially change our value systems. You know, AI is going to change the way we value work and, you know, the way we use our time. But climate change is going to bring us together. You know, there's no such thing as a national climate change policy. We need to have a global approach to climate mitigation and all of these things. So if you think about it, capitalism is part of the reason we have climate change. If it wasn't for capitalism with, you know, rewarding fossil fuel companies for pulling all out of the ground, we could have developed solar and renewables back in the 70s and 80s to be sort of, you know, green energy.
But Brett, weren't we supposed to do this with carbon offsets and carbon credits and things like that, to where we were supposed to work with companies that were more conscious and then not work with companies and somehow, you know, actually take more from them because they weren't looking at the future of the planet?
It's a good idea, but it's a patch on the existing system, and it doesn't, and it's not evolving us fast enough, you know? And so ultimately, how do you get the entire planet to work on some goals? Like, you know, think about the estimates that are coming out now around 2050. We're looking at 300 million to 1 billion eco-refugees displaced as a result of sea rise. And, you know, look at Tonga, Maldives, Bangladesh, and so forth, right? How do you deal with that in a capitalist system? Well, it's very, very difficult, because who do you get to pay, you know, for this stuff? And so we need new value systems emerging that are better organizing principles at resource allocation. You know, that's
there is also this
the
fundamental problem, in my opinion, that, well, capitalism suspects that the population is constantly growing, but this is contrary to what actually,
it's not actually going to happen. You're correct.
Our interest on Earth, because, well, let's be honest here, it's not about Earth and planet, and it's about us on this planet. Like, the planet will thrive, whatever happens. It's about us here and what our future will look like. So in my opinion, that's very interesting that now the concept of capitalism is changing, because, well, capitalism is not still depending on the population growth. It's something different. What is
Guys,
it?
let's take a question from Saka, who is calling us from Dubai. Go for it.
Hey guys, it's been an absolute blast to listen to you. My question is to Brett. Brett, we're talking about sustainability, and we all know that Bitcoin is as such not sustainable in the way it's being mined. Moving away maybe even from cryptocurrencies, what do you believe currencies would look like in a couple of years down the line, maybe 20, 30 years down the line? And how can we solve this sustainability issue that we have with a lot of these cryptocurrencies, mainly Bitcoin?
Great question. Well, you know, if you look at many commentators from the Bitcoin world, of course, they will make the comparison of, you know, the existing banking system with Bitcoin, that Bitcoin is still a lot smaller. And others will say, well, this is going to push the green revolution, you know, creating green Bitcoin and so forth. But I think ultimately what you're already starting to see is a culture shift. People are pushing back against wastage. They're pushing back against single-use resources like single-use plastic and so forth. And we're pushing back against companies that support coal plants and so forth. So when you see the evolution of this on a trending basis, ultimately we have to get to some future where that sustainability is sort of built into the system. And so how do you create that sustainability? One way you could do it, for example, is, you know, companies that are on the stock exchange, instead of just measuring them by their stock market price, you put a carbon metric next to them, or you put a renewable metric next to them. You have different value systems in terms of measuring the performance of companies. Now, if you look at Apple, for example, Apple has already started to figure this out. So you look at their statement for 2030 in terms of their future of their business. They're talking about recyclability, renewables, renewable use, sustainable production of their products and so forth. Apple already realizes that their brand is going to be tied to this type of sort of positive feedback loop system in terms of reuse and reusability. So take that as a corporate template for the pressure that's going to come on corporations in this space for doing the right thing.
All right. Again, if you have any questions or anything, put inside the chat. We love to get what you're saying. Dr. Marwan, you're more than welcome to say something. I've never seen you not ask a question. You're always inquisitive. What do you got on your mind?
So I don't know, Brett, if you've heard about things like radical markets, the idea of these lease economies and things like autonomous agents, which is the idea that I think Joe Lubin proposed, that everything will be automated. Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, so I'm there's also, you got Jamie Dimon, who has talked about stakeholder capitalism and things like that. The fact is, the pandemic has probably brought to attention the fact that capitalism doesn't have all the levers we need when things rapidly change. The bigger crisis around COVID was not actually the health crisis, but the economic effects of COVID. In the United States, 30 million people unemployed, and an increase in homelessness by 400% there. That's the outcome of a system that can't respond in real time to these sorts of big shocks. But underlying around the world, big picture that we have to solve is this problem of inequality. And that's a really core issue in respect to design of markets. If you're familiar with Will Durant, he's a famous historian from the US. In the 1960s, he wrote a book called Lessons from History. And he said that throughout most of history, humanity had been essentially a pyramid-shaped model of economics, where the wealth in a feudalist system grew uphill or flowed uphill to the wealthiest 1%. But the most successful economies, the post-World War II US economy and the Chinese economy today, are diamond-shaped. They have a very strong, robust, growing middle class. And so that's what creates massive consumption across the market and grows the economy faster. But in the US since the 1980s, we took the diamond-shaped model and we started to flatten it out again with deregulation of financial services, pressure on trade unions, and so forth. These models are more stable, but they produce inequality. And so that's a core problem we have to address. The inequality in countries like the US, UK, Australia is the worst it's ever been historically. And that's why you see massive protests around the world sort of increasing. It's economic uncertainty, and that has to produce some sort of change.
Let me grab another question from our attendees. Mr. Singh, you have a question for Brett King. Come on, unmute yourself. Come on, unmute yourself.
Press the button.
Come on, you can do it. You had it unmuted earlier. I'm going to have to skip you if you can't do it. All right, you have lost that opportunity. I feel bad now because he was unmuted a moment ago. Hey, Brett, let's talk about Libra. Let's talk about what Facebook was trying to do.
Dion now, Ken.
It's nostalgic for me, okay?
The coin previously known as Libra, yes.
Yep, talk to us. Is that, because by the way, you and I remember this too. In 2005, I predicted that Facebook was going to become the biggest bank in the world. And it looks like they could have, but government's got in the way of that. Where do you think it's going to go?
If they hadn't had the Cambridge Analytica debacle, I think you're very possible. Right? It's very, very possible because the utility of money and the utility of trust around money is really network-based now. So if you look at Alipay and Tencent WeChat Pay, out of China, I know you're very familiar with them, Ken, but maybe others may not be as familiar. But in 2020, those two networks did about $52 trillion of total value of payments. That's twice the entire plastic card architecture that, every debit card, credit card in the world in 2020. And so already mobile wallets are the #1 day-to-day form of transacting for payments. So if you look at that in terms of why that is the case, it's network effect. The fact that they use things like the Lycée packets, the red packets for Chinese New Year and other things to create that network effect. And the Chinese have learnt from that with the yuan, where they're using that same sort of network effect distribution to sort of create activity in the Chinese markets. And they will do the same for trade. So Libra had that opportunity. Facebook had that opportunity, but sort of screwed it. But there is an interesting other side point here, is that as money changes, identity is also going to have to change. Right now, today, we have this crazy sort of system where we have this incredible digitization of money happening with cryptocurrencies and so forth, but your identity is still your mother's maiden name, your date of birth, your address, and if you live in the States, your social security number, none of which is securable anymore. So we need digital identity infrastructure as well. Now, that's where Facebook and others can become identity brokers that sort of are attached to our financial transactions as well.
We're ahead of you, Fred. We're ahead of you. We're doing that already here in Dubai.
No, I know Emirates has a great ID program, a broad biometric use as part of it, but behavioral heuristics as well. China, obviously, with their facial recognition play, is very advanced with this. It's fairly inevitable.
Yeah, and I think it plays a key piece here. I think identity is something we shouldn't just pass over. I think identity is a key piece in any kind of economic system. You have to not only establish identity for transactions, but also for conversations. The problem we have now with social networks is that people hiding behind pseudonyms and hiding behind fake accounts and things like that. Once you establish
that's
identity,
a problem. But Marwan, I think it's interesting of what a social network can do is use sentiment to create value also. So not just engagement, but come on, we all know that, what was it, a Black Mirror, where people were rated based upon who they are. And we know that the social score is being used in China. So only Facebook right now is ubiquitous enough to create something. I wonder if they're not going to get it, what will get it? Is there mobile phone companies who will have that connection to our day-to-day life so they can watch sentiment? Brett, anyone?
I think, well, this is where blockchain with this consensus mechanism becomes very important, right? Because you can build consensus-based identity networks where you have trusted parties who can, populate those databases, but have broad use of the data, where it's, immutable, as we say with blockchain. If you think about it at a macro level, Ken, the problem is, and pandemic's shown this, is the 21st century is going to be about digital services. Everything you do in 10 years will be available digitally. Your healthcare will be digitized. Your education, will be high quality education will be ubiquitous on the digital layer. All of those things require a digital identity, right? And so if you look at the Indian experience with the Aadhaar card, they tried for years to create financial inclusion for rural locations, but they realized that financial inclusion was dependent on digital inclusion. And to do that, they created a national identity infrastructure, the Aadhaar card. And so these things are sort of tied together. If you want to provide digital services and reduce the cost of government and improve efficiency, you have to use technology. But to access those services, people need to be online, they need to have access to the internet, and they need to have a digital identity.
All right, our next question is coming from Mohammed. Mohammed, unmute yourself and please ask your question. Come on, guys. There you go. Whoop. Sorry, Mohammed, do it again. I muted him by accident. Go try it again, Mohammed. Unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, thank you guys, very fruitful discussion. And in this kind of world that is really very dynamic in a very fast way, how can we manage the values in societies in a world that people are gaining very easy money through cryptocurrencies?
Well, I'll have a shot at that. In terms of Yeah, in terms of the value systems that are applied to this, I mean, you have to look at this as a transitional process. At some point, central banks and others will try to bring in some controls over these cryptocurrencies. We already see experimentation with that. But the real question is, what do we value? This is really at the heart of it. And philosophically, we're starting to see sort of the early days of Aristotle and Plato and Socrates sort of coming back, which is, what's the purpose of an economy? What's the purpose, of humanity? Aristotle said it's for humanity to thrive and we build each other up. But as an economy, should the purpose of the economy be to create economic growth, GDP growth, or should it be simply to provide, happiness and health for citizens? And so I think we've got this economic waterfall right now where economic growth and the growth of corporations and startups and the growth of crypto is sort of emphasized, but it sort of should be flipped the other way around, whereas the economy first and foremost should be sustainable. We don't, it's not just about the extinction of humanity, it's all these other species that are on the planet shared with us that are being affected by, our footprint, on the planet. How do we flip that? How do we create a value system that is sort of built towards sort of a sustainable living? Then the other thing is AI. As AI comes in, how do we create an ethical framework for AI's operation in society so that we don't continue the biases and inequality that we have in the current system today? So some very deep questions there, Mohammed, and I think it's going to take us a while to sort of sort this out, but I see this sort of as an evolution in our thought process to some extent. It's pretty big picture stuff.
I don't mean to drop the bomb on that question. That is, let's go to quantum and AI. I know we don't have an actual operating system. The qubits aren't totally, everything's not totally working there. But as we have that exponential growth that Peter Diamandis always talks about, we're not far off from true quantum computing with a real operating system and AI. Are you on the Bill Gates side or the Elon Musk side, where one's going to destroy us or we're going to live in harmony with it?
Look, I think it's possible for us to live in harmony with it, but what that requires is planning and forethought. And the key problem we have right now is that AI's development is essentially led by the market, and the market is trying to create that sort of exponential growth in that tech without saying, hang on, should we be doing this? Or how should we be doing this? We're not very good at long-term planning, Ken. Capitalism has produced this very short-term view of the world.
But also, who are we? I mean, these are states, people, customers, institutions, big giant companies.
How do you get all those stakeholders involved in creating an ethical framework for the operation of AI? And even look at, you're familiar with this, Ken, Google's ethical board that they had for AI, and that sort of got disbanded recently under mysterious circumstances. So how do we create, even just to your point, Kristina, if you get 100 people from 100 different nations in a room to try and codify ethics, it's such a difficult problem, right? But there is some hope out of this. I don't know if you guys have been watching Taiwan with their e-government system, but there's the virtual Taiwan system that been put in place there through Audrey Tang. And this was very interesting. They had this experiment in setting policy and getting consensus around some fairly sticky policy issues. And they used social media and chat rooms and consensus-based approach, and it was extremely effective.
That's a great example.
There is hope.
Yeah, but Taiwan is so small, and if you compare it with the countries like the US, it's just it gets impossible to implement the same ideas and processes.
Well, ultimately, if you look at the core problem in the US around inequality, which is gross inequality there now. I think ultimately the only way the US is going to change is when there's, revolutionary aspects there. I think the EU may adapt more smoothly to this, but it's ultimately how much are we willing to commit to long-term planning? If you want a utopian, positive, inclusive society, you have to plan it. You can't leave it to capitalism to get there. We'll never get there. And so we need to start thinking about these long-term plans.
We have a few moments left with Brett King. If you have a question, please put it inside the chat area. Dr. Marwan, continue.
Yes, I wanted to ask you actually. So we're seeing in the crypto space, at least, we're seeing a trend where a lot of the millionaires now within the crypto space are coming from India and Africa, and even in the NFT space, a lot of artists are actually from Africa now that are making really good money within the crypto systems. Do you see a shift of power because there's more millionaires in India who are coders? More heads of companies like Google are Indians, and more access to jobs, access to finance, access to all these kind of digital money. Do you think this will create a shift and even in the politics of leaderships of certain countries and demographics?
Well, one of the really interesting aspects of this is the 21st century is going to be undoubtedly a digital century. Everything we're talking about right now is about digitization of our economies and, electronic systems of exchange and so forth. And so for that, you need very good skills in the technology area. And, if you look at STEM, science, technology, engineering, math, this is where India whips the United States ass, in terms of, in terms of their capabilities.
Absolutely.
China, the same, China has 700 times the PhD graduates in STEM programs right now than the US. And 80% of STEM PhDs in the United States are actually foreign students. And so if you want to look at the foundational elements of future economies, you have to look at that core ability to get technical. Africa, because it's greenfield, is now introducing mobile financial inclusion. They're introducing solar. They're introducing all of these technologies because they haven't had that infrastructure that they have to replace.
There's no legacy. Matter of fact, we'll be having
Absolutely.
Acon join us in the next couple of weeks, and what they're doing with the A-coin is a very great example. Let's go to Ron Levy, who's one of our attendees. Ron, you have a question?
Yeah, I do. This is fascinating, by the way. Really hitting on a couple of subjects. One is, polluting the planet and climate change. And then the other is this balance of value that's taking place and changing. Within the Western world itself is one conversation, but really the US is about 10% of the population of China and India combined. And I'd suggest that China and India, the treatment of their citizens, obviously India being much better on some levels, and then on other levels, very out of balance. But China is its own story, I would put in the problematic category. All these changes we're talking about, if you don't get China and India, due to their, you can call it government or their cultural structure to participate, it's a little bit futile, not worthless, but a little bit futile. How do you balance that out with the changes that blockchain crypto have delivered with getting them to be adopted with, in essence, what is 10 times more of the population?
Yeah, great question. I mean, if you look at China, China has made some progress in this area. They've brought all of their population out of extreme poverty over the last 20 years. They committed to that, and they, successfully did that. They have the fastest growing middle class in the world. By 2035, they'll represent about 25% of the middle class globally, and so that growth there is quite significant. India, I recognize there's sort of some key problems there. But the other thing to think about is Bill Gates has proposed this recently, and I think I agree with this, is on the pollution aspect, as we start to commit as a globe to undoing the damage that pollution has occurred in our oceans and in our environment, the biggest polluters of the 20th century are going to be asked to foot that bill. And so I think, that's going to be part of that sort of cultural change when China, India, and the US in particular are asked to provide huge amounts of cash to sort of start mitigating climate risks and undoing the damage of pollution. This requires a change in value system. But I'll give you sort of a clue to sort of the global change in mindset that's occurring. In the first 20 years of this century, we've seen a 200% increase in the average number of protests per year that we saw in the last 50 years of the 20th century. But more importantly, we've seen 1,000% increase in participation in those protests. So more and more people are getting involved in these social issues. So when you have this gross inequality that you're talking about and these core problems in terms of government systems, there's either two outcomes. Either you have legislated redistribution of wealth and legislated change and changes in policy, or you have revolution. And so these protests are going to grow until sort of these cultural changes will need to take place. And we're seeing right now in India with their response to COVID, obviously this is going to have some broad social impact in terms of their policy as well.
So I want to make sure, again, we're doing all these discussions as we're leading up to the Future Blockchain Summit and FinTech Search, which is happening October 17th through the 20th in Dubai. We want to make sure you go to either one of those pages, go check out Future Blockchain Summit. Most of these videos that we're doing are there, and you can watch our past videos of our interviews. So make sure you're there. Brett King is joining us today. And by the way, we're doing this in conjunction with Cointelegraph, which Kristina, thank you so much for joining us every other week doing this, which is great. Hey, Brett, 2 questions. My first one is Bank 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, 5.0, 10.0. Is there really a future for the banks, or are they just a dinosaur waiting to go away?
No, actually, to Saka's point, Bank 5.0 is essentially bankless and cashless. Right. And so that's where it stops for me, in terms of that cycle. The thing with banking is it's both the centralization of money management that banks brought us, but it's also the role currency has to play in our lives. And so we're seeing these alternative currencies launch at such a rate right now. If you, to Kristina's point when she raised this earlier, if you were to redesign money for the 21st century, would it be geographically based? And the answer is no, that doesn't make any sense. It'd have to be a global currency that works on the digital service layer. And so, fiat currencies aren't well suited to that. You have to have exchange rates and you have to have, currency reserves and all of these things. Whereas if you were designing money from scratch for value exchange in the 21st century, it would potentially be quite different. So I think the role of money itself will change. And as that changes, that the role of banks and the role that they have in terms of custody over currency is definitely going to change. And in the end, we may have more bartering. For example, an Uber driver, for example, may barter his hours driven for access to an apartment or for holiday, rentals and things like that. AI will be able to manage those types of complex value exchange arrangements far better than we do today with sort of the banking and currency system. So it gets pretty interesting.
All right. And my last question, what's the deal with the white glasses? Come on, what's going on there?
Katie chose them. Katie chose them, and it's part of the brand, like the brow,
There's no lenses in there, is there? There's no glass.
No, there is. I'm short-sighted. No, really? I swear. Yeah.
Dr. Marwan, any last questions for Mr. King?
Yes, I do actually. Mobile phone companies, like we've seen Apple created Apple Wallet, Android Pay. Do you see them creating their own cryptocurrency or at least digital vaults? I know all of them have secure spaces. Do you see the potential there?
So one of the parallel things that's happening right now, and you'll see this with the launch of Apple's smart glasses, which will probably be announced at the end of this year, be available sometime next year. Facebook is working on Project Aria, which is very similar sort of smart glass thing, is built into the glasses is image recognition. And so, as you look around your apartment, your smart glasses, for example, will be able to see your keys. And if you say, you ask your AI AI, where are my keys? It will know from image recognition and so forth. So when that's happening, as we're classifying these objects in the real space using this virtual technology, we're also creating a framework for digital assetization. We're as Ken was talking about before, you're putting your house as a digital asset in a vault and things like that. So it sort of goes, it's going to parallel this new computing platform. But if you think about payments in this space, if you walk into a Costa Coffee in Dubai with your smart glasses on, you won't transact in the way we do today. You won't have to pull out your wallet. You won't swipe a card. Your glasses will interact with the merchant and make the payment. In that world, these operating system companies do act as some gatekeepers. For example, they can facilitate a lending opportunity. Like if you walk into a grocery store, you don't have enough cash to pay for your groceries, this sort of smart cloud infrastructure based around the glasses could say, hey, here's some extra money to finish off your grocery shopping today. You don't need to apply for a credit card or any of those things. It can all just happen in real time with this technology, based on what's happening in the real world. So they will be some gatekeepers, the technology players.
Kristina?
Well, you are all black and white today, so I will be defending the green topic. My question is, okay, we will not be going to Mars. I think we all agree here, at least during our lifetime. What about our planet? What exactly will happen, and when will we see the mainstream shift toward climate change agenda? Well, you mentioned today Reem Stanley Robinson. He also wrote an incredible book that is called The Ministry of the Future. That is, I think, is created in like 2025 in his book. Oh my gosh. Okay. I like this connection. So will we have something similar to the Ministry of the Future? And what will be our roles in this future? Green future.
Yeah, Kim, Stan talks about the Great Turn, right, in the book, which is where humanity sort of recognizes this. There's going to be people fighting the Great Turn, that shift to sort of that collective view. But there's two major shifts in socio-political organization principles that's going to happen. One is we make big government small through the use of automation. And so all of the arguments that you see, from the right in the US, for example, against the size of government, we're going to solve that with AI. Right? Healthcare costs will be a quarter of what they are today in the US based on the use of AI as an example. That the other thing is collectivism. Right. So we've in the 20th century, we shifted to this very individualistic thing. I should win. I should have the opportunity as an individual. My rights are important, but we're going to shift more to a collective rights view. Coming back to what I think Ron asked about India and China and so forth as well. That sort of collectivism, that we're all in this together as a human species, is going to be an outcome of the climate change effect. That, well, you can't have 80% of Bangladesh affected by sea rise and just say, hey, it's not our problem. You can't have 1 billion people displaced by climate change because of changing crop usage and sea rise and all of those things, and say we'll leave them to themselves to sort that out. You need to have a global collective approach to this, and so that's probably going to happen, in my view, around 2035, 2040, where that shift takes place. Part of it is also the fact that millennials and Gen Zs and alphas do have different value systems that are emerging on top of this, and they'll be setting policy by then. So I think that's when we shift from sort of this individualistic sort of capitalist system to more of a collective view of humanity. And our
is
direction.
it that you call techno-socialism?
Yes. Absolutely. Okay. And they're the two major forces, right? The change in government, highly efficient resource allocation through AI, and the collective view of humanity. And so when I talk about techno-socialism, it's not a political view. It's really this sort of collectivism in terms of how we come together to manage the problems that we face. And ultimately, there's sort of 4 potential outcomes. One is techno-socialism, where we plan and we approach this collectively and we act on a sort of a coordinated basis. The other is where we just let capitalism go. You know, Jeff Bezos with his orbital cities where the rich go into orbit and things like that. That's sort of what I call neo-feudalism. The other is where we wait and we just don't do anything, and that's sort of a collapsed state, what I call fail-to-stan. Or the other is where there's a backlash against technology, called the Ladistan approach. So they're sort of the four macro outcomes where human society can go. Obviously, I think the best outcome is techno-socialism, but that requires a sort of commitment to humanity collectively that we haven't yet seen. But then we've never faced climate change before.
Brett, in your research doing augmented and looking at where currencies are going and just the planet's heading, has there been any science fiction movies that are coming close to what you see in the future?
Yeah, we have this debate. I had this podcast a while back where we had Kevin J. Anderson, Ross Dawson, Mike Walsh, and a few on it where we debated this. And I think probably, in his defense, Kim Stanley Robinson, in terms of the eco piece, is probably one of the best writers in respect to this. He's done a whole series on how climate's going to affect society, and it's very interesting. But even Asimov with the 3 laws of robotics and things like that, Arthur C. Clarke predicted a lot of the stuff that we're talking about in terms of networks and digitization. But utopian science fiction doesn't sell as well as dystopian science fiction, right? And so, we've been trained to think that, the future tends to look more negative and dystopian. But I would like to think that, the Gene Roddenberry outcome, where money isn't important and that we use the resources we have to further, accelerate the furtherance of the human species is probably the best model that we could have.
I have to, so I don't know what conference it was. I bumped into Vint Cerf, and Vint Cerf is one of the fathers of the internet. I know you know who he is, Brett. And Vint and I were, by the way, Surf is CERF, everyone. Surfing the internet is not SURF, it's Surf CERF, okay? So Vin, as we're walking around, goes, "Hey, I'm gonna have lunch. Would you like to have lunch with me? I'm having lunch with a friend." I go, "Heck yeah, the father of the internet." I mean, literally the oracle. So I go into this hotel room and there's 3 plates. I sit down, it's Vin and I, and also Majel Roddenberry walks out.
Oh, wow.
So it was that's Gene Roddenberry's wife, who was incredibly instrumental in creating the next
the voice of the
Star Trek.
computer on Star Trek.
That's
Next
right.
Generation.
But it was interesting because she said, if Star Trek can become real, the world would be a much better place.
Yeah.
And boy, a lot of the technologies become reality. And I'm wondering now if what you're defining is what's next in the world. God, I hope it does happen. It doesn't sound like a dystopian future. It's just a better future.
Well, let's just look at a few key problems. So let's look at homelessness, right? Yeah. So you can build with 3D printing a new home in 24 hours for the cost of like $3,000. There's no need for homelessness. If you look at energy, renewables are now, solar is 1/6 the price of coal-based electricity. So there's no scenario where coal continues to pollute the planet, because it's just so much. It's now lower in cost to build a new solar farm than just keep running a coal plant, right? And so energy is going to be free very soon. And then look at healthcare. We've got gene therapy, which is going to eliminate diseases from our genome. But more than that, we're going to be using AI for diagnostics. Now, 40% of conditions are misdiagnosed today. And so AI will eliminate all of that. And we'll be getting more into sort of preventative medicine rather than reactive. So there's a whole bunch of things coming together that do give me cause for optimism.
So, Brett, if people want to find out more about what you're doing, where your focus is, where should they go?
brettking.com. Follow me on Twitter at Brett King, or on LinkedIn. But yeah, watch for, as Kristina pointed out kindly, thank you, Kristina, my new book, Techno-Socialism, The Rise of Techno-Socialism, comes out in October. And we have the foreword by Arnold Schwarzenegger there. It's going to be, I think people are going to find it really interesting.
in his voice, he actually says California. And then I want to thank
Yes.
Dr. Marwan for joining us. Dr. Marwan, you're working, of course, on tons of initiatives for Dubai. Where can people find you, Dr. Marwan?
Blockchaincenter.ae.
Can you say it again, please, with a little more enthusiasm?
Sorry, blockchaincenter.ae. And of course, they can follow us on our Instagram, Dubai Blockchain Center.
All right. I know him in person. He's a fun guy, but you're talking like Arnold Schwarzenegger now. Come on,
Get to the
I
top.
know what's happening.
We are
below
1
your
hour away
Just
from fasting. Yeah, exactly.
I know.
Thank
All right.
you for
And
defending
Kristina,
me.
of course, everything that's going on with Cointelegraph, what's being featured right now should we be excited about?
Yeah, so while you are waiting for the new Brad King's book, please check Cointelegraph. There is so many exciting things happening in the crypto world. Also adding to your list, Brad, Philip K. Dick, that 50
Oh, yes, of
years
course.
ago, like has predicted
All right.
Of course.
almost everything. And I
Yes.
would recommend an incredible series, Electric Dreams, that actually creates a lot of reflection. So I think this convergence of different technologies and also different sources that help you to think about what the future holds and hodls for us. This is the good thing to do.
Sounds good. And of course,
To the
Oscar, who
moon.
is the main chair over at FinTech Surge in the Future Blockchain Summit. It's happening October 17th through the 20th. People want to find out more. Where should they go, Oscar?
fintechsurge.com and the futureblockchainsummit.com. And come to Dubai.
Everyone, thank you so much for joining us and being part of this. We do this every other week. We're looking forward to seeing you on our next one. Mr. King, thank you so much for giving us your time. Everyone, have a great week and we'll see you later.
Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.